I cannot stress enough how much I hate when people who are supposedly fans of something will go against the creators if one thing happens that they don't like. I'm going to talk about two major issues here. Actually, I'm going to talk about three. One of them is more minor. If you couldn't tell, I'm a little pissed right now, but let's get into this. I have seen so many examples where people have been a fan of a show and then just sort of decided that they run the show now, and if anything goes the way they don't want it to, they're going to lash out at the creator of the show. And if you're in the digital circus fandom, you know exactly where I'm going with this. But I have three things to get into, so let's get started. First, this one isn't really a major issue, but I have to talk about number lore and alphabet lore. This has actually been a huge problem ever since way back when A released. This is really a problem with a lot of things, and it's also going to be a minor problem with the two other things we're going to talk about later. But the main problem with the alphabet lore / number lore fandom is the fact that they can't wait for these release dates. Now, currently, I do kind of understand why a lot of people would be mad because, it's been how long now? It's almost been a year since we got 5, and 6 still hasn't come out yet. And I haven't even seen anything from Mike in a long time. Now, I get that a lot of his fans are kids, so it makes sense. But come on. As the guy who's been single-handedly recreating frame by frame every single episode in a slightly more difficult way, but still, even if it is a little bit easier to do off of computer, it still takes a long time because you still have to hand draw every single frame. And I know that better than anybody. It has been a year since I last it's almost been a year since I last posted 2, and I still haven't come even close to finishing 3. All that aside, though, this better be the best episode yet with how long we've waited. Now it's time to talk about yet another thing that pissed me off. For a lot of people, they grew up with Stranger Things. It's been around for so long now, and I get that it was a lot of people's childhood. So seeing a final season that could have been way better than it was is understandably a little bit annoying. However, that doesn't give you the right to find literally anything you can to blame the Duffers for. I highly doubt it was written by AI. I just think they made a lot of stupid decisions with this season. I myself can admit that sometimes I use AI to help me come up with scripts for things. I used it a little bit to help me with the Bart movie. That doesn't mean I made AI write the entire Bart movie. I didn't just type into ChatGPT and ask it to write me the Bart movie. I had help from ChatGPT, but I didn't write the entire movie. Just because one of the tabs open on the computer was ChatGPT doesn't mean they were using it to write the entire script, especially since the majority of the scripts for season 5 were already written by the time that clip was taken. And on top of all that, if it gets to a point where you're literally looking for that, you have to look for that to even notice it. If it gets to the point where you're looking for things to blame them for, get a life. And also, please, please, please stop saying that the final battle wasn't long enough. The one thing I think they could have done was actually have, the Demogorgons and the Demodogs and the Demobats, the things that have been in the show for how many seasons now, actually be a part of that final battle. But what people are doing here that's annoying me is that they're only counting the battle with the Kaiju Mind Flayer and the battle between Eleven and Vecna as the final battle. You can't do that, because as much as my friend, yes, I'm talking to you, Nate, would love to argue that that's technically the final battle and all the other battles in the finale are just leading up to that, that's not really true. The action doesn't stop from that point up until they finally defeat Vecna. In fact, the action doesn't even stop until 11 kills herself. So technically, the battle starts the second 11 enters Vecna's mind and throws him off the dining table. That's where the battle starts, and it doesn't technically end until 11 kills herself, because that entire period is full of action. So whether they're battling someone or not, it still counts. I definitely do think there were a lot of things they could have done better with this season, but I don't think it was as bad as people are making it out to be. And now it's time to rant even more, because the last topic we're going to talk about is the amazing digital circus. If it gets to a point where you literally can't even like your own show anymore, it's not your fault. What really annoys me is the fact that the fan base is blaming it on Goose like it was her fault that the finale got leaked. What do you want her to do? Unleak it? They're already going to be out there, and people have already spoiled it for yourself. I've spoiled it for myself, if the leaks are even real at all. But people are getting mad at Goose like there's anything she can do to fix it. And Glitch can't really do anything either. The most they can do is take down the leaks, which they've been doing. And then after Goose responded with, who cares, a ton of people started hating on her for that. Even though they're the reason she doesn't care anymore. If I had a show with a fandom like that, I wouldn't care anymore either. If anyone is to blame for this whole situation, it's the hackers who leaked it in the first place. Not Glitch, not Goose, the hackers. And on top of all that, why is this fandom terrified of their own show? I have seen so many people who constantly go into the comment section after the episode is over and joke about how, oh, that was so scary, or crap like that. If it's scary, then why are you watching it? You're probably a 5-year-old iPad kid anyway. And if you're not, you're some random trans person who smells like they haven't showered in 7 decades. And on that topic, I'm not trying to offend anyone by saying this, but there is a stereotype for fans of that show. In fact, fans of any Glitch or indie show in general, there is a big stereotype for them. I myself, thankfully, don't fall into that stereotype. The problem is, people hear that I'm a fan of the Digital Circus and ultimately assume that I am one of those people, and I'm not. On top of all that, there is a ton of drama. People complaining about, as I mentioned way back in the beginning, Goose, back when episode 5 happened. Goose did a whole thing where she had to keep delaying the episodes out of spite because people kept butchering her about when the next one's going to come out. Like, leave her alone. The whole, again. And then she had to go out and write that full paragraph explaining that she is done with the show because of what the fans have turned it into. And I completely agree. The fans are also constantly trying to get the voice actors to do a ton of stuff that they don't feel comfortable doing. And if one thing happens related to the show that they don't like, the entire fandom will start attacking Glitch, Goose, the voice actors, anybody related to the show, like it's their fault, when half the time it's the fandom's fault. Now, before this video's over, I just wanted to talk about a couple specific things I feel annoyed about with Stranger Things, because I still haven't gotten my anger out about that either. I've already talked about people having that stupid problem with the finale that isn't even an issue in the first place. But let's talk about how nobody is acknowledging the actual problem with Season 5. The fact that Kali is in it. Apparently something else people have problems with, which I just found out today, is Holly's character arc. What the hell did she do? And not to mention the fact that if it weren't for the kids, that would have been a major story. First of all, that was a good story. Anyone complaining about Derek. She was in was perfect. But you know what? If Holly didn't have the character arc in Season 5, neither would Derek. So, there you go. I'm 90% sure the only reason they like him is because he's an absolute jerk. Why is that the case with, like, every character? Even going back to Digital Circus, people love Jax because he was a jerk to everyone. And I get there's more depth in that, and he has bigger lore behind that, but still, the people literally stopped people started complaining about Jax being a main character after he stopped being a jerk to everybody. Like, once people found out he has more depth than just a jerk, they all of a sudden started hating on Goose for making him the main character. Like, what? Anytime a character has actual depth, people hate it. Back to Stranger Things, another thing I want to talk about here is Steve. Because people, before the finale released, the one thing people were constantly posting memes about is how if Steve died, they would be, like, upset. And they would be mad. And I agree with that, because Steve is my favorite character. So tell me why, after they almost killed him in the finale, but didn't, people were mad that they didn't kill him. What do you mean? 1 second you want him to be alive, and the next you don't. Like what? Back to the circus, because I just thought of this. Speaking of death, let's talk about Kane. There are more people sad about Kane's death which, not gonna lie, he was my favorite character too. But he was only my favorite. He only became my favorite character after episode 8 because holy villain arc. But all of that aside, Kane's death scene was the best scene in that entire episode. I don't care. The whole thing where he basically turned into Am and started torturing the cast. I can't even imagine how long that probably took to animate with the whole glitching thing. So tell me why people are focusing more on the fact that they're depressed that Kane is dead than they are on the fact that that scene was absolutely epic. This is going to sound really, really wrong, but just hear me out. I liked Kane better as a villain than as not villain. He was still funny. He was still one of my favorites, but I liked him more after episode 8 because he actually had more depth to him. This is, again, a problem. The more depth a character has, the more people just decide we're going to hate on them now for some reason. And specifically in the Digital Circus fandom. We've seen that with Jax. All of a sudden, that now that he has more depth and he's a main character, people are just hating on him now. Why? This takes me right back to Kane. People were all over Kane when he was just a goofy little guy that didn't really have that much lore. And then all of a sudden, now that he actually has like a good backstory and a good character arc, people just all of a sudden are all upset that he's not the guy he used to be. Because, God forbid, a character actually has like a good story. I keep circling back, but what does this bring me back to? Holly. Because once again, people are afraid, again, this is also probably another thing, people are afraid of change that they're not going to like. That's a thing with Kane, that's a thing with Jackson, apparently that's a thing with Stranger Things too. Because, why? Why are we all of a sudden, I think it's because people are caught off guard by the fact that she actually has importance in the story, which is understandable because I was at first, but after I saw how good of an acting job Nell did, and how important her character actually ended up being to the story, I realized maybe this was a good decision. In fact, probably it was the best part of season 5. Because, let's be honest, it's better than whatever the heck Dustin had going on that entire season. Dustin was like the best character in the entire show. Every season up until 5, where he just randomly fell off for no other reason. If all the other characters are going to lose all the depth they've had up until the last season, at least give us a new character that has a good story. And that character was Holly, she had already been in it, but she hadn't had that much depth. Another character, Derek. In fact, let's put all the kids into this, because technically they all fit into this category. Now I'm tired of ranting. So if you can even stand to hear me talk anymore after that, thanks for listening, and don't get seasick. Bye.